Welcome to the Red Sneaker Writers Podcast. News, interviews, and writing tips for people who are serious about having a writing career and want some practical knowledge to help them achieve it. Your host is the nationally best-selling author of more than 50 books, William Bernhardt.
Hello, sneakers. Today is the best of all possible worlds in the book world. And like any good lawyer, I have at least 3 pieces of evidence to proffer in support of my claim. Number 1, today is the birthday of the author who wrote one of the most beautiful books and created one of the all-time best fictional lawyers in all of literature, and that's Harper Lee. Number 2, I'm interviewing a terrific author and one of my favorite people in the whole world, Lisa Scottoline. And 3, my new book is out. You knew this was going somewhere, right? Of course, this is it. There it is. Thank you, Jesse. Splitsville is now, well, actually, it's out on pre-order, but, you can find it and order it. This is the first book in a new series featuring a new character, Kinsey Rivera, although not totally new. If you read my last book, Final Verdict, Kinsey makes a sort of guest star appearance. She's the live streaming lawyer who was giving Daniel Pike grief while he was trying to kite surf. Well, now she's got a book of her own. She's working in a Seattle law firm that specializes in divorce cases, hence known about town as Splitsville. But this being one of my books, as you might guess, she soon gets in a lot more trouble, deadly, dangerous trouble, than a mere divorce case. Although some of those can be kind of dangerous too. But anyway, that's not what the book is about. If you like my previous work, I think you'll like this one too. So please check it out. As usual, I'm joined by my sound genius, Jesse Ulrich. Jesse,
Hello.
How's life in Tulsa today?
It's good. I mean, we've had a weird couple of weeks where it snowed one day, and then a couple days later it was 80. So that was something. But I'm ready for it to be weather where I can sit outside comfortably for more than, an hour or two.
Well, it's almost May. It should be time for that, shouldn't it?
One would think.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about this new book because I remembered that character and I liked her. I didn't connect the two until you just mentioned it. So that's awesome.
Fantastic. My interview guest for this episode is Lisa Scottoline, the New York Times bestselling author of more than 20 best-selling and record-shattering novels. Her first was published in 1994. She's won an Edgar Award, and she has written all kinds of things. Crime, mystery, obviously, since she won the Edgar, legal thrillers, mainstream, and women's fiction. And now she's released her first historical novel, that's it on the left of the screen, Eternal. As if that weren't enough, she also co-writes a regular column for a humor column for a Philadelphia newspaper, and teaches a course at the University of Pennsylvania prestigious law school. I want to talk to her about writing and her writing process and this genre-shifting business. But first, the news. I've got 3 news stories for you today. First 2, I think, may be surprises. The last one, a very pleasant not surprise. The New York Times has reported on a wave of email scammers who are successfully intercepting prize money that was supposed to go to authors who've won major literary prizes, like, for instance, the Bailey Gifford Prize. The prize awarding people received an email that said, quote, "I'm currently experiencing a few hiccups with my bank and also with the pandemic. Could you please send my prize money to this PayPal account?" Supposedly from the author who won, but actually not. As it turns out that during the past year, at least 5 British book prizes have been targeted by the same swindle, and at least one of them paid out. The Rathbones Folio Prize paid £30,000, that's about 41,000 US dollars, to a scammer who posed as the author who won it, Valeria Lucelli. which meant that the prize organization then had to come up with another 30,000 pounds so they could actually pay the person who won it. People running all kinds of prizes from the Pulitzer to the Nobel on down are on the alert. Obviously, this is concerning to me because that means that people like you and me, people who are supposed to be receiving money, authors, my favorite people in the world, are getting scammed. Jesse, you're my online expert. How can people protect themselves from these scammers?
So first of all, I gotta give props to the person for pulling off the reverse Nigerian prince in this situation.
Right.
And when it comes to emails, the most important thing to do is to actually hover your mouse over any link or any email address, right? Because any hyperlink, if you hover over it with your mouse, it shows you what the actual link is, and so you can kind of look at that and be like, does that look like a real website? If it doesn't, don't click on it. And if you can't verify the email address you're getting from somebody, do not trust it.
Yeah, especially when you're about to send out 30,000 pounds
Yeah.
to somebody. I think
Yes.
that's a time for a heightened security. All right, second story. You may remember on the last podcast, we talked about Amazon's new Vella program, which is basically designed to provide serialized fiction on a subscription basis. People were wondering, why this? Why now? Where did this come from? Well, we may have the answers now. It turns out it may be to compete with the keenly successful China literature, which basically does the same thing and more. There are more than 330 million readers of Chinese online literature through this organization. Most of their readers are under 30. They tend to favor popular fiction genres, fantasy, science fiction, mystery, romance, and they tend to read on their phones, often reading short or serialized fiction. They're growing and getting bigger, and now they've targeted America. In fact, China literature is now actively wooing American authors because, as you can see from that chart from Forbes that Jesse put up, although they have more work to sell, more work in print than Amazon, something I wouldn't have thought possible, but Amazon has more authors as a result of Amazon's KDP program, which allows people to self-publish their own work. So China Lit's trying to get into that business and steal some of the American authors away. They've had great success with serialized fiction. And so this Amazon Vella program may actually be designed to head China Lit off at the pass. So you see, multitude of riches. Last time I told you there was a new opportunity, possible publishing opportunity through Vella, if you're looking for a way to self-publish your work. Now it looks like there are at least two opportunities, Vella and China Lit. Okay, one last story, and this has to do with a study, really the report of a series of studies from Healthline. They have reported, hold on to your hats, reading books positively affects your life. You're thinking, I already knew that, right? You've known it all your life probably, but now there is hardcore scientific evidence. Healthline reported on a growing body of research that indicates reading is literally good for you. Reading literally changes your mind. They've been using MRI scans, and they've confirmed that reading involves a complex network of circuits and signals in the brain. As your reading ability matures, those networks get stronger and more sophisticated. So the brain scans showed that throughout the period when you're reading, when anybody is reading, and for days afterward, brain connectivity increased, especially in the part of the brain that responds to physical sensations like movement and pain. Study goes on to detail a host of other benefits from reading, like reducing stress, preventing cognitive decline, increasing empathy, alleviating depression, building your vocabulary, helping you get a good night's rest, may even help you live longer. Get this. And this isn't, pseudoscience. This was a long-term health and retirement study that followed over 3,600 adult participants for 12 years, but found that those who read books lived longer than those who either didn't read or read magazines or other less immersive media. The study concluded that those who read more than 3.5 hours every week, I bet that's you, right? More than 3.5 hours every week. Those who do were 23% more likely to live longer than those who didn't read at all. Well, again, this is probably no surprise, but it may help you understand and explain why you're doing what you're doing, why you're trying to write, which is probably the hardest thing in the world, second only trying to break into the world of writing. Yes, you've got something to say, and yes, you want to participate in the great conversation. But now you know that the benefits of getting your story out there so other people can read it are even greater than you may have realized. And speaking of reading, I've got a friend who has a wonderful new historical novel out, and I can't think of a better way to increase your lifespan than by reading Eternal. The tagline for this book is, "What war destroys, only time can heal." Lisa, are you online with us?
I am. That's so interesting what you said about reading. I agree. I concur.
Yeah, I hope the word gets out, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it's great to see you, my old friend.
You too. Okay, my traditional first question for this podcast for interview guests.
Right.
If you could give aspiring writers one piece of advice, I know you could give many, but if you had to narrow it down to one piece of advice, what would it be?
It would be just do it. That is what I say to myself all the time. 33 novels later. I think there's an aspect of writing, and that's why I think it's so great that Red Sneakers, that you're doing this podcast, because I think of it as behavioral. In other words, you don't want to overthink this. You need to just start to do it. And I could elaborate on that if you want, but the idea is basically that you just sit down and you start. And I'm a big fan of word counts. So you give yourself whatever word count you can do, 100, 50. And you do that no matter what. And you don't worry about if they're good words. They don't have to be good words the first time around.
Right.
As Anne Lamott says, right? Right? They can be terrible.
Yes.
No one will know. But you just get them down and then you get it good. That's how I think about it.
And that's how books get written, right? You do that every day or as close to it as you can, and eventually it adds up.
It's kind of a miracle, because honestly, I couldn't even, I don't know what, I look back and I feel very lucky all the time, but I look back and go, when did this start? And it's like, how did I get so many books written? And you just go, you just do a little every day. It's just like, when you have to clean the house, it's overwhelming if you look at the whole big task. But like they always say, break it down. And writing is no different than that. No different at all.
I think I shorted you in the introduction. I said more than 20 books, but it's more than 30, isn't it? 33? It is
more than 30. And eight or nine nonfiction memoir, just like humorous stuff that I do with my daughter.
Collections of those columns from the newspaper, right?
Right. The Philadelphia Inquirer. And the truth is, anyone listening, all writing feeds other writing. None of it's wasted. None of it.
Right. And there's some value in keeping it going, right? Keeping the writing mechanics moving forward.
Right. Because I find that I'm kind of a normal, insecure person. So I find that if I don't write for a while, I get a little bit of a fear builds up. I'm like, oh, this is going to be hard. How am I going to do this? And I just say to myself, just do it. Just do it. Get out of your own way.
So how'd you get started on the newspaper column? Were you just thinking, I don't have enough to do? Because I think that was probably not it.
No, it was really that honestly, I felt like part of the reason I got into writing, I started with legal thrillers, as you know, and I felt like, because I felt a little like there weren't a lot of women main characters way back then. There still aren't that many. And then I felt the same way about the newspaper. I was reading I remember Ellen Goodman, I remembered Irma Bombeck, and just like kind of a woman telling about her life. And I thought, so I actually went to the newspaper and I said, you could use this. And they said, all right, give it a shot. And that was 13 years ago, and a Sunday column every Sunday. And I'm really happy about it. It's just fun.
That's a bunch. That's 52 a year. That's a deadline.
Well, you know what? I'm fine with deadlines. I just say to myself, and it's actually, for people who are listening, it's an interesting exercise because it's 800 words max. So you have to get to the point, which is not something I always do. And it's taught me that it becomes a little writing exercise. Pick a little thing, talk about it and try to make it funny. And it's on my Facebook page every day, every Sunday morning at 9:00. They can read it.
Surely the hard part is coming up with the idea. I mean, once you've got the idea, I know you can write 800 words, but it's getting the funny idea that would be the challenge.
I try not to think about, I try to think of, you're right, that's true. I try to think about, you're talking about, you want it to be relatable. So sometimes the idea is something really simple, like why don't dish towels stay on a rack? Now that's not going to change the world. But like I just wrote Eternal, that's about drama. That's fascism, a love triangle in World War II. Not everything has to be that. Sometimes it can just be, isn't it annoying how you can't keep your dish towels in order? And and then you got to think about one or two other things that you can't keep in order in your house. And I live that life. So I write it, and it's very relatable. And I think people find that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's talk about, well, this new book and what led up to it. You are pretty classic at this point, genre hopping. You've done almost every kind of writing there is to do, which is, of course, exactly, you go to conferences, including even the one I host, WriterCon, and you'll sometimes hear people say, oh, don't genre hop, publishers won't like it. I've heard agents advise people not to do it because it confuses the audience, and yet here you are, you've written crime and mystery, legal thrillers, like you said, mainstream fiction. Yeah. Humor, exactly, nonfiction, women's fiction, and now historical novel. What you just can't be pigeonholed, or what's driving this?
What to do?
Or well, I think that, yes.
Like, and I don't want to gainsay other advice, because I do think probably in the beginning it is a good idea to sort of, and generally, I want people to do what they want to write. You got to write what you want to write. It's still America, and you still get to do that. And generally, I've been writing about, I started writing, like, they called them legal thrillers. I never thought they were legal thrillers. I thought they were a story about women lawyers, women who happened to be lawyers, and what their life was like. And then I said, well, the women tended to have families and be involved with them. So then I started to write, well, maybe I can write family stories that may or may not be lawyers. And then I did that. And so in a way, it's sort of just a natural extension. I had always sort of wanted to write this book set in fascist Italy since college. I was always interested in this subject, and we can go into that if you want. And I just said, it's really just, if you're writing, spend your whole life writing about family and law and justice. This is just family. Eternal is just family and law and justice on a much bigger scale. It's just writ large. So instead of one family, there's three. And instead of 2 weeks time, like you would get in a conventional domestic thriller, there's 20 years. And also, I think for people who are listening, I hope writing is challenging, and it's okay to feel challenged. I mean, it's scary, but you get very used to being scared. And that's part of this job. I don't ever know, like, how my novels will end. I don't even know how they middle. I just start and try to figure out what happens. And I'm very anxious for about the first draft. And now I know that's a constant. And I didn't, give myself an ulcer yet. So I'm ahead of the game.
But so this book is like 30 years in gestation, or
like 40
more.
Seriously. Because long story short, it was a college course that I was lucky enough to take with Philip Roth, who taught at Penn. And it was about the novel, and there were a lot of novels about the Holocaust, and also memoir. And he introduced us to the work of Primo Levi, the Italian Jewish chemist who survived Auschwitz. And I was like, I'm Italian. I was like, I thought I knew a lot about Italians and Italian history. And I thought, this is so interesting. And then the more I learned about it, I said, this is sort of a true life event that a lot of people didn't know about. And I said, I'm going to write about that someday. If I ever get to be a writer, I'm going to write about that. So I finally got to be a writer and finally decided to write about it.
Oh, you must have had to do a ton of research. How did that?
I did. I think I've been researching it, honestly, off and on for 40 years.
Oh, well, that helps. If it's something you know very well, then that's got to make it a little easier. Well,
that's the cool part about our job, right, Bill? I mean, you're interested in something, so you get to read about it and learn about it and watch movies about it. And in historical fiction, I read a lot of fiction of period fiction. So I read Elsa Morante and all these wonderful writers just to understand how the voice worked, how the locutions worked, how it was different. It was fun and great. was
But
great.
I would always be working. I've written historical stuff too, but my fear is always the email. You know, it's going to come when somebody says, "But you said Mussolini came in 1937, but it was really 1936 in December or whatever." You know,
Right, right.
there's always the guy.
Well, there's always the guy, and there's always the critic, and there's always the what. There's all that negativity. Look, I have it myself. I'm my inner critic. So I double check everything a million times. And I got a historian. And when I finished the book, I said, I would like you to read this and tell me if there's anything incorrect, because nothing can be incorrect, especially an event that happened in October 43 in Rome, which I don't want to give spoilers about, but people actually died. I mean, it's a war crime committed in Rome. And so I knew I had to do that justice as a lawyer and as a human being. So I got one thing wrong. I had one street name wrong. And I was proud of that because that's my job. My job is to get it right. And you know that from writing legal thrillers. The law, I've always had correct law. I've always had correct legal procedure, criminal procedure, police procedure. That has to be true. That's my name and my integrity embodied in the novel. So this, in a way, was no different from that.
Let me take a short break here and say, because I realize now I forgot to say it before, that I can see people are watching this live. If anybody has a question that you would like to ask Lisa, please just type it into the chat box,
Of
and
course.
I'll get to those in a little bit. So I've had the pleasure of reading this book. I can tell you it is wonderful. I can see why. And I'm not just saying that because I think you're terrific, although I do. But I can see why Library Journal gave it a starred review. And get this, everyone. Good Morning America made it the March must-read of the month. Have I got that right?
Yes, it's really nice.
That's pretty cool.
And it was a library reads. It was a lot of things that I haven't gotten before in my career. So that's sort of nice that you can, try something new and have it, luckily, look like it works out.
You have gotten an Edgar Award,
I have.
So I'm pretty jealous there. And what's really impressive to me is that you got an Edgar Award during the 90s when people were saying, oh, those lawyer books, they aren't really mysteries. But apparently yours were.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I also was nominated and lost one. So I've won an Edgar Award and lost one. So don't be too jealous.
Yeah, I think being nominated.
It's good to learn to lose. It's good to learn to... all that disappointment, all that rejection that a lot of people who are listening to this probably got, you and I both got, and you'll still live in fear of the bad review. Now everybody can review online. I read all my Goodreads reviews. I read all of the online reviews. That's part of this business too, and you develop a hide.
I don't mind. I enjoy reading the Amazon reviews, even when they're inevitably not all flattering. But even then, I find it educational. Sometimes reading a reviewer review, a paid professional, that can, I don't know, it kind of rolls off me and think, so what? But when actual people who paid money and read it have something to say, I pay attention, don't you?
Absolutely. And I look for consensus too. If everybody sort of said the same thing, then I go, you need to think about that.
Yeah.
I listen. I'm still going to do what I think is right, but I really respect other people's opinions. I'm very interested in what they think.
Let's talk about Eternal a little bit more. This, I think I was starting this sentence before and got waylaid, but it's a beautiful book and very heartfelt, very romantic. You've got this sort of triangle of affection going on with the three lead character. It's not a romance novel, but it is romantic. Is that fair to say? Where'd that come from?
Well, I think I know, because I haven't had a date in about 85 years. I mean, my imagination is fertile, Bill. What can I tell you? The way I look at it, this book is about, as you say, it's a love triangle set in fascist Italy, and it's about the rise of, against the backdrop of the rise of Mussolini. And I started to feel like what this book is really about. I can tell you the moment I thought it, because you have to, you think about what kind of quote you want at the beginning. And I had all these quotes, because I have been thinking about this story for a long time. And then I came up with just Love Conquers All. And when I put it on the book, I said, that's a little hokey. Like, you should be able to think of something cooler and a little more esoteric and that was more impressive. And then I said, no, that's really the message. So in a way, counteract all that fascism and that hate, the book is really about love and the power of love. And it's not just romantic love, because these are 3 young people and their families, and they all love each other. They grow up as best friends. The Gentile family stands by the Jewish family when the anti-Semitic laws are enacted. There's friendship love, there's romantic love, there's mother and daughter love, even though it's imperfect because Elisabetta, kind of the main character, doesn't have a very good mother. But so it's really about I think when I think about it now, it's really about the redemptive power of love. It's kind of uplifting, even though it's sort of a dark era.
Right. What war destroys saves or heals or something like that.
Yeah. Love heals. I mean, love heals.
I was talking like there are only 3 characters in this book, but far from it. When I opened it, and right at the front, you see here's the dramatis personae, and I thought, oh wow, this is going to be complicated.
I always wanted to do that in a book. I always wanted a map and a dramatis persona, and there's not that many characters. Basically, 3 main families. But I was like, I'm the kind of, I read a lot, and I sometimes forget where I am, and I want to go. I'm the person that goes to the front of the thing and says, "Who's that guy again?" And so for that person, I was like, okay. You
got a place to look.
Yeah,
Flip
it's
back,
fun.
or if
really
you're on
fun.
an ebook, I don't know, you swipe back to that somewhere. I thought it was, it's old fashioned in a way. It's kind of a harkening back, which seems appropriate for this book since it is historical.
You say that. Here it is, right? Now I will tell you, while we're talking about books, I asked for a paper. I wanted it to feel soft. I wanted the whole package to feel old-fashioned. I also had a hand in picking the font.
Really?
I did. I said, I want this to feel like an experience, just in the same way. For example, you probably talk to your people who listen to your WriterCon and also to the podcast about voice. And I had to sort of not write in voice my voice is fairly authentic to who I am and who contemporary characters are. And you can't use contractions. You can't do any of this stuff. I wanted them to enter the book, and there's the map, which I found online on Etsy from a map from 1928. Really? I mean, really. And they were nice enough to give me the rights, and I wanted it to be an immersive, go back in time experience, and it's tactile. So that's what a control freak I am.
Yeah. You even control what temerity. You even chose the font.
I'm telling you, I've learned to make my voice heard. It's not easy, but usually they don't really care what the font is. And you have some rationale. They're willing to, they're a wonderful publisher, Putnam. And they you want to put a map in? All right. And it was super nice of them. And it really makes a difference to me. It made a difference. And to the reader, I believe.
Oh, it's probably not that anybody felt like you were interfering. It was more, we didn't think of that because, they're publishing a lot of books this month, but you're publishing one.
Right, exactly.
So you can give it more attention.
You've waited 40 years to write this book. Believe me, I'm all over this book. I did a lot of different things marketing this book that I've ever done before. And we can talk about that if you want.
Oh, please. Let's hear about it. What's the marketing?
Well, what happened is the pandemic intervened, and I had gone to Italy for these research trips, and I went on the biggest one in 2018, and I sort of didn't know. I basically knew the locations in the book, and I went to the locations and videotaped them. And so talked about, I found the actual house that Elisabetta would live in, which would be in Trastevere, which is the artsy district of Rome. And the house that there's 2 guys, Sandro and Marco. Sandro lives in the so-called Jewish ghetto. I went to the Jewish ghetto, took a little video there. They're 2 minutes.
Wow. And
I took about 23 videos. And then before the pandemic, came upon us, sadly, and I got a pub date for the book. And I said, I have the time before the pub date to show these videos on Facebook. So every Tuesday night, starting in November 10th and just ending last night, I showed a video of me in Rome, talked about how it applied to the book, showed the trailer, and took questions. And they're all on my website because I thought this would be great for as a companion to people reading the novel. I read historical fiction or any fiction. Gee, what's her house look like? Well, I described it. But if you want to actually see it And who doesn't want to go to Rome, especially when you're not allowed out of your house without a mask?
Right.
Go look at it. So I've never in my life done that. I don't know, honestly, if any author's ever done that. I think they all should. I'm going to do it from now on because I think it's kind of great. I felt that the readership was really engaged. I felt that it was kind of a cool way to talk about the stuff I learned. Because as you know, legal thrillers are all the same. You know so much research that doesn't make it into the book because it would weigh it down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it would interfere with the story. But I was like, well, I didn't waste my time. Right. And it's so cool to have it there. There's even an interactive map that we made using the videos and the pictures I took. The people can go and spend time on Scottoline.com and look at it.
That is some kind of cool.
Kind of crazy, right? I was like, I don't know if you're allowed to do this, but my publishers were like, go for it. And I was like, okay, I will.
Is it just Scottoline.com?
Yeah, it's Scottoline.com. And the videos are also on my Facebook page. And every Tuesday night, they're there.
Okay.
Crazy. Fabulous. It was crazy, but fun.
We'll put that in the show notes. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Lisa, but
no, go ahead.
Film rights, have you sold those for Eternal?
People sniff around, so I'm optimistic. I think it would be great. I want to stay optimistic,
Me too.
But you know what that's like. I mean, they option you, they don't, it doesn't get made, whatever. But here's what I say to myself. I'm lucky and I'm blessed and I believe it because I got to write a book exactly the way I wanted to and write something new, which is not something that is always easy when you get older. It's not always, there's plenty of people who want to see another thriller. They'll get that next time, but this is what I want to write now. I'm going to write another thriller and then a historical, then a thriller and then historical.
Well, here's why I asked. We got a question in the chat stream, which is from Julio in California, who I know is a hardworking writer himself and also works at NBC Universal. So, Julio, tell someone they want to option this book. It would be a terrific.
Yes, for TV as well.
Terrific show. But great. His question is, when did you decide you wanted to be a writer?
You know, I've always loved books. And I think that people who want to be a writer should really, really read a lot. Stephen King says that too. And that's like your school. You don't have to go to the MFA program. I really don't think you need to do that. You just need to read and then you need to just do it. So in answer to the question, I secretly think I always wanted to become a writer. And I just didn't have the nerve. And my family didn't have a lot of money. So when I was good at English and got good grades, I was like, well, then you go to law school. And I was always interested in justice, which is why I'm still writing about justice. So this is sort of the long answer to Julio's questions. I think a little bit I said to myself, when I got my first divorce, my life kind of fell apart. I was divorced. I had a young child. I was a single mother and I was really, really broke. And that was when all of my plans about being a lawyer and everything kind of got scuttled. And I said to myself, well, you always wanted to try to be a writer. And also now that you're a single mom, you can't really be a trial lawyer. At least I didn't feel that I felt that I wanted to stay home and raise her.
Right.
So it was a personal goal for me. And I said, now you should try to be a writer. And I was looking around, I was reading John Grisham, a lot of wonderful legal thriller writers and no women, really at that point, no women lawyers, no female lawyers. And I said, I can do that. I can contribute that. And maybe that's why I'll get published. And I had 5 years of awful rejection. My favorite rejection letter, which I always love to quote to give people hope, was from a New York agent who said, we don't have time to take anybody else. And if we did, we wouldn't take you.
That seems unnecessary.
I know, very unnecessary. Very unnecessary to be mean. And I hate that. And that's why I always want to encourage people because, I see that guy. I saw that guy at Book Expo once. When I was at the keynote, I was like, dude, remember me? Because I'm still mad at you.
I bet he's sorry now.
That's a long answer to poor Julio about like so there's when I knew, which was early on, and when I finally went for it, which was when I was about 30 something.
So we know you write regularly, probably every day. Do you have people in the chat box are talking about what a mean rejection that was? They're horrified.
Oh, I like Calvin says you seem supremely confident. That's so no. I mean, I'm only coming off that way. I tried to get my hair, blow it out, and everything. Calvin, I am not supremely confident. On the absolute truth is I'm insecure, and Bill knows me, so he'll know I'm a very normal person. I always think every day, It's a blank page. What am I going to do now? So please understand. That's why I think it's so great that Bill does this. And he's such a natural person without pretense. Please understand, we all feel the same way. So your question, Calvin, was, have you ever had to deal with imposter syndrome? I feel like, I guess imposter syndrome is you think you have people fooled. I don't ever think I have anybody fooled. I always think I'm always happily surprised that they like it. Like a lot of times like, wow. Like sometimes I read my reviews on Amazon or on Goodreads or if I get a media review, which is wonderful. The Washington Post had wonderful things about this book. And I was like, wow, this is great. I'm just always really happy. And
yeah,
I'm the surprise ending. It's like, wow, who thought of that? So I try, but I do think, and honestly, I think all of us have those negative voices because writing isn't something that generally people encourage you to do. And the world isn't always going, yeah, give it a shot, kid. And I always think my other advice to writers too is I always say, protect your candle, which is I always imagine, I always think of Nicole Kidman and the others, people running around in a drafty Victorian house with a candle,
right?
They have to protect it.
Right.
The candle is your writing and your dream. If you want to be a writer, you have to protect it. You have to protect your time and you have to protect your wish. You're allowed to want to do it. You're allowed to, even though you have a mortgage and responsibilities and kids. And so all of that negativity, you visualize it. I visualize, picking it up and putting it to the margin. It's just not going to get in my way. And I do that every day. Every day.
That's great. So that's sort of where I was going anyway, asking about your writing process. Do you have, give us the quirky stuff. Do you have a blanket? Do you have a cat that sits in your lap?
All the quirky
How do you
stuff,
do it?
Babe. There's a lot of self-talk. I do 2,000 words a day now because I have the time. And I live alone. I'm celibate. I mean, so I'm sublimating actually. But I live on a farm. I do some farming type stuff. I got 4 dogs. I have 2 cats. And I settle down around 9:30. I give myself a little time on Twitter and all that BS time sucky social media that we all love.
Right.
And then I settle down.
Have to do.
Right. I do 2,000 words. Sometimes I'll be done by 6. That's about 10 pages. Sometimes I'll be done by 11. And I do that every day until I have a first draft.
So seriously, would you stop after 2,000, even if you're like a page from the end of the chapter, would you stop at 2,000 words?
Honestly, yes, because secretly my office is upstairs, although I work anywhere in the house. I'm in the kitchen now. I think it's really good to have a word count, not just to make it, but to know when you're done. Because you don't want to be this person that you're always feeling guilty. Like I'm watching, Wolf Hall on Netflix, but I should really be upstairs working. That's not true. That you are done. If you did your 2,000 words or your 500 or your 50, you get to check your box that day. I did my job that day. So I actually do stop. You wouldn't even believe it, Bill, but I watch that word count thing like it's my blood pressure, man. I'm like, okay, what? I rarely go over it. I'm never cooking that hard.
I hear what you're saying about the guilt, though. If you've done your pages, then you don't spend the rest of the day thinking I should be writing. You've done your bed.
No, right, and that's good. You don't want to lose your sanity. You really don't.
So you've been writing for a while now.
30 years, 35.
Have you picked up, you remember like a moment of insight where you suddenly realized, oh, that's what I should have been doing all along?
Only as far as time management. It's probably boring, but if people call and stuff, I used to drop everything. Now I don't. Now I am a bitch. And that's what you feel like if you're a certain kind of person. You're a nice person. If you're nice, you feel bad when you set limits. At least that's my experience. So I have learned to say no. For a long time, I didn't. And then I'd be up at midnight going, oh, I've got to get my word count in and I wouldn't be as fresh. And I finally said, Lisa, it is okay to make this your priority. And look, I have friends, I'm lucky enough, and they'll go, do you want to go to lunch? They used to say that. I would go, I would love to, but I can't. Or even on the weekend, I'm not running around during the day. It alleviates my own anxiety. And it also is a job. It's very hard, especially for a long time. For the first 2 years, I had a day job. I was a law clerk.
Right.
And so, but I think it's a really good lesson, because that light went off when I finally said, you're allowed to prioritize yourself. Everybody else does. You're just picking up the phone and they're calling you. If you were in court, they could not reach you. And in the days when I had a secretary, she would go, sorry, she's in deposition. Well, guess what? So the revelation is, you want to work as hard for yourself as you did for somebody else. And I worked very, very hard for somebody else. The enemy nowadays is this device.
Right.
The phone. You got to go, I'm sorry, I'm unavailable. Because normally when people are calling you, it's their agenda. And what you have to do, look at me getting all preachy, but I'm a mom too. And I want people to achieve their dreams. If you keep answering someone else's agenda, you cannot prioritize your own. And also vis-a-vis what you said at the beginning, I thought was so true about, I honestly conceive myself as a person who's training my brain. I'm training myself to center, focus, concentrate on the long form over a long period of time. And you've read the studies now, because now they came out, that say, if you keep looking what's on Twitter, what's happening with Kanye, what's happening with politics, you start to wire your brain to become distracted. And you cannot produce you must focus when you're writing. Stephen King said it best. He said, you imagine the scene and then you reproduce it for the reader. That is really, really true. Yeah. So you have to immerse yourself in this world of imagination, and you can't do it if you're going to look aside. So even if you only have an hour a day, get up at 5, get up at 6. I used to do that. Or write when the house is quiet, write on your own rhythms, but focus and then write. You're entitled to it.
Yeah.
Look at me, vote for me. I just want people to know that. I think there's so much practical information that I've learned, and that I know other writers, when I'm on panels, I go, oh my God, they're right. They're right. You have to say it out loud.
I would assume you've got to focus to do anything well, but there's no way you're going to write a book if you can't shut off outside interruptions, right?
Right.
I sometimes get chastised by my sisters. So how'd you miss the call? I've been calling. Well, the ringer was turned off. That's how I didn't hear it.
I'm sorry. I love you. I just can't drop everything, because then, as you know, and they probably know too, you go, well, where was I? What was it? What was the mood? The tone changes. There's a shift. You can't pick it up. It isn't making donuts. It just isn't time to make the donuts. It's different.
Someone in the chat stream is talking about your daughter, who is also a writer, published her first book last year, I think, and it's coming out in paper in June.
I have it here, hoping you would ask. Ghosts of Harvard, she's my co-author for our humorous books together, but she wanted to write herself, and she wrote this novel, and it's really wonderful. The reviews were wonderful. And
the reviews were wonderful.
Yes, it's going to be out in paperback in June 22nd. I think people would love it. It's kind of a psychological mystery and a thriller and a family drama all wrapped in one. That's why I think your initial point was so right, Bill, about genre swapping. I mean, who's to say what the genre is of anything? I just think it needs to be a really great story, well told and not boring. That's my touchstones.
I don't think readers and fans are nearly so locked into one, you must write this pigeonhole as publishers sometimes think. They just want a good book. Exactly. And they know you know how to write one. So
exactly. Can you tell a story? Ann Beattie says it's a unified consciousness. Just tell a story. And when I wrote Eternal, I said, you have to write this at the pace of a thriller. You cannot bore. You can never be boring. And thriller writers know how not to. Well, thank you. That's all me, Edgar. As people,
I should clarify that. I wasn't saying it is boring. I was saying it does have the pace of a thriller. It is not remotely boring. But what was that like? So your daughter comes in and says, I'm interested in writing, and how difficult and fraught with risk that is. How did you respond?
Well, she never really we're really close. We're best friends. And I knew she was thinking about it. And I think it's great. I think it's also interesting because, to a certain extent, like my mother told me, be yourself. My mother barely graduated high school. We were not a bookish family. I mean, the joke I always told, which drove her crazy, is there was one book in the house and it was TV Guide. Now, she hated when I said that, but it was true. So Francesca, my daughter, Saratella, did grow up in a house that's full of books. I mean, they're everywhere. And so I wasn't exactly surprised, but I'm proud of her. You know, she'll, like any child, now she's 35, all our kids find their own voice in their own way. And I'm such an Italian mother. My father used to come to my signings, and when somebody said, "You must be so proud of your daughter," and he said to her, I heard him say this, I'll never forget. He said, "Lady, I was proud of her the day she came out of the egg." And that's, my family was like that. Like, we love you. You don't have to get A's. You don't have to make money. You don't have to do anything. And I feel that way about Francesca. So I wish her luck. I think it's like any job, as you know, it's hard work and you do it every day and you just take yourself to work and try your best and be yourself.
That's terrific advice. So what's next? So you've written just about everything there is to maybe not how-to books, but everything else I can think of. What's next for you?
I think, well, I'm in the middle of the next domestic thriller, which is kind of fun after Eternal, because Eternal had, you know, it was, I loved how swept away and transported I felt. And it took me a little while to expunge it. In fact, we were talking earlier before, because I've become a great fan of audiobooks. And the audiobook of Eternal, I've never listened to an audiobook of my own before, because you think that's a little weird. But you realize what a different, or maybe egomaniacal, but you realize what a different, these readers were so good. It's Eduardo Ballerini, and who is reading the Divine Comedy, which I'm also listening to, and Cassandra Campbell. So it's these these voices, they voice everybody, and you realize it's a performance. And I loved being swept away to that time period. And I still like dipping into it, even with that I'm writing something else. And as always, you know, I read when I'm writing, don't you? I mean, I read different things. So I feel really lucky to be able to, I'm going to do both. The reception to Eternal was wonderful. And happily, I'll go return to historical fiction after the domestic thriller. And they all feed each other, you know, because I find myself writing a thriller differently. Now that I've had a historical backdrop, I said, you know, give us a little, this is me talking to myself. Right, as we
nothing
go
wrong with that.
What can I tell you? Sometimes I'll say it out loud and the dogs will look up like, oh God, she speaks, you know.
Right.
But I'll give a little backstory more than I would have. You know, when you write, especially a book like Eternal, where I'm sort of something about time with that title. And you start to come to the conclusion that time is really, to a certain extent, conflated. So the present and past and future all are one. It's true in a family. You know, I'm a lot like my mother, and I'm a lot like my daughter. And what's the difference of time? It's a distinction without a difference, as lawyers say. So when I was writing this thriller, I said, give us a little backstory on this guy. Tell me a little more. And I never would have done that before Eternal. I never would have done that. I would have given a little, but now I'm like, you have a little, and it enriches it. It gives it a layered story that I might not have before. All writing. My first novel was never published. It was roundly rejected. And then I lost it. I don't know where it is.
No.
Yes.
Seriously?
It was on these little discs, you know, the old discs.
Yeah,
it's gone.
I remember.
But the truth is, and I want to say this for people who are listening, you know, no writing is ever wasted. It teaches you to write. You learn on the job.
That's right.
And right? I mean, so there's rejections don't matter. Just start again. That's the key thing also. Just move on. Don't belabor the same manuscript. Send it out, and while it's out, give yourself a week off or something, and then start on something new. Keep moving on.
Right. Lisa, I could talk to you all day long, but
I never shut up.
No, it's because you've always got something terrific to say. But I suppose I should ring the curtain down on this until maybe we can have you on again when that domestic thriller comes out.
I would love it.
Thanks so much for coming on this podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Billy. It's always great to see you, and I really appreciate it. Good luck, everybody. Go for it.
Excellent. All right, a couple of quick parting words and then we'll be done. I mentioned last time that I'm teaching these online lectures at Context Learning, doing an actual course that starts on May 1st, Saturday, on the great mystery novels. It's like an online book club. We're going to read a different mystery novel, starting with The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins, the first ever detective novel. That starts on Saturday. So if you're interested, please saunter on over to contextlearning.com, CONTEXT learning.com, and check it out. I already mentioned that Splitsville, my new novel, is up for pre-order, so please take a look at that. And of course, if you're enjoying these video podcasts, remember you can subscribe to my YouTube channel so you'll know every time we go live. You can subscribe to the podcast, you can join my Facebook page, and you'll always know what's happening next. And what is happening next? We're having a change of pace, actually, because, not to brag or anything, but we have, with Lisa, had 5 New York Times bestselling authors in a row. So we're going to take a break. And next time, we're going to talk to Sharon Jenkins, who is the head of McWriting Services. She is a specialist in digital book marketing and has a lot to say that I think would be of use to all of you. So I urge you, don't think, I'm a writer, I'm not to the point where I need a marketer. I'm going to skip that one, because let me tell you, a lot of what she's going to talk about and recommend, it's not stuff you do after the book is written in print. It's something you should be thinking about before. In fact, it's something you should be thinking about when you're writing it, or maybe even before you start writing it. So tune in. She is an extremely vivacious and lively speaker, and I think you'll enjoy that very much. Until next time, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.